Room with a new code of conduct and compensation structure for court interpreters. And joining me here in the Harmon studio to tell us more are Senior Judge Pro Tem Elizabeth Barrett-Anderson and Superior Court Deputy Clerk of Court Jessica Cruz. Thank you, ladies, and Hafa Day for joining us.
Hafa Day. Good evening.
Okay, so I guess the first question, Your Honor, would be how much in need, maybe as a proportion of your current caseload, are interpreters needed for procedures of any type?
I've been a trial judge for 14 years, and I can tell you that there continues to be a need every day for interpreters for non-English speaking defendants. And that has existed for 14 years, and it continues to exist today.
Mm-hmm. Is some sort of context lost when you know, the whole lost in translation thing, but, you know, when you have trying to explain, you know, obviously the American judicial system to someone who may not, or probably doesn't speak English.
Lost in Translation, isn't it a movie?
That was a great movie.
That was a great movie. I think I actually saw it. Absolutely. The basis for the requirement for the court to provide for criminal defendants an interpreter is to guarantee not only justice, but to be sensitive to the constitutional due process rights of every defendant. The Civil Rights Act, also of 1964, requires us in the non-criminal context also to be sensitive to those of limited English proficiency. So there's another side to this that we're not going to talk about today, but we also have to address. And in the criminal context for a criminal defendant, the Constitution requires that an individual know what he or she is charged with to begin with. That the individual defendant understands that they have a right to an attorney, a right to remain silent, a right to a fair trial. And in those contexts where a defendant would like to plead guilty, that the defendant knows what he or she is pleading guilty to, and that guilty plea is knowing, intelligent, and voluntary. And you cannot assure that those constitutional rights are protected unless we are sensitive to those constitutional rights by providing each defendant the ability to have a translator to understand what's going on.
Okay, Jessica, how many translators and interpreters are there right now? Because obviously there's so many different languages, and there are probably, you know, 6 or 7 dominant languages that would prevail on this island for non-English speaking people. But how many are in use right now?
We actually have a listing that consists of approximately, I would say 40 some interpreters, but the more dominant interpreters are Chuukese and right now Chinese.
And does this, Your Honor, I would assume that it would greatly improve the flow, because you know, maybe in years past where if an interpreter could not be found, would have just delayed the process, and, you know, the whole thing about justice delayed is justice denied? Or?
Absolutely, and I think even in the news media there have been a lot of concerns about criminal trial hearings continued and continued and continued. So it's important that we build the pool, and part of the program is not just to find interpreters, but it's to build a pool of what we call registered interpreters. What is a registered interpreter? That's someone who has applied, who has been screened, who is then accepted to undergo training by the judiciary, who then takes an examination, and if successful, will be classified by the court as a registered court interpreter. The difference between a registered and an unregistered is compensation. And for the program, our goal is to put registered interpreters into the courtroom to work with the judges and with the defense lawyers and also the prosecutor, so that we have well-trained interpreters who know the sensitivity of criminal hearings and do a better job.
Now, are you in need of certain languages? Because obviously it's a big logistical challenge to handle every single dialect out there in the world. So if there's somebody out here who, say, you know, with Guam's new Russian tourist market, if you're in need of that, or if somebody speaks Greek, for example, are people able to contact you and just say, hey, if you ever need me, I'm around, and I'm able to qualify myself?
That's the whole outreach. That's why I'm sitting here this evening.
Okay.
For the next couple of weeks, I am doing an outreach program. I just did a presentation to the Rotary Club of Northern Guam. Not necessarily that the goals of the Rotary Club fit with interpreters, but just to get out there, do an outreach. If you are interested in becoming a court registered interpreter, then you can apply. You can apply online at www.guamcourts.org. Am I right?
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what you pull down, but there's an application form. Perhaps Jessica can tell the public what's the icon you pull down. You can apply. I don't believe you can apply online. I think you need to actually bring the application in. We are looking for a pool of interested applicants in the next week or so. After that, we will then filter this pool. We will do a first training and a first examination. We will then do another group towards April and May. So it's this process of building and building. And don't worry, I had a gentleman today who spoke fluent Italian. I think he was Italian, and he said, "Judge, do you need anybody in Italian?" I said, "Sure." We might need that someday. So if you are fluent and you are interested in helping the court, whether you want to be a registered or unregistered court interpreter, absolutely.
All right, most excellent.
And we do know that when we go to Kmart and we go to Ross, we hear that lovely Russian being spoken today, which is really nice. And we have had one or two Russian tourists who have come into the judicial system, so absolutely we need that.
Oh, okay, well, unfortunately, we got to go to commercial right now, but Your Honor and Jessica, thank you so much. We'll put those links online.
Thank you very
much. All right,
much.
and remember, you can check that out. GuamCourts.org is the URL that you want to hit. But stay tuned because we will be back right after this.